Welcome to Permission to Be Human, the podcast. I'm your host, Mel Findlater, mother, coach, and curator of Permission to Be Human, the company and community. If you're a mom, know a mom, or want to be a mom, and you crave getting out in the world to make a difference, then you're in the right place. This is a space for moms like you to connect with yourself, your purpose, and your big, audacious dreams. Because when you feel your best, you can better you, your family, and the wider world. Let's do this. Happy birthday to us. It is 1 year since this podcast, Permission to Be Human, the podcast, has come into fruition. That's not even counting the trailer that happened a little while before. I'm so excited that, one, I've made it this far. Being consistent every single week, an episode has come out Tuesday morning, 7 a.m. PST. And you know what? I'm so excited that people are listening because I really believe in this message that mothering is what's going to change the world. And you moms and you people mothering with big, audacious dreams, we need to support you to be your best self, right? And to have those big dreams. So thank you so much for showing up and listening to this podcast. Whether you've listened since the beginning or this is your very first episode, I am so grateful and appreciative for you being here right now. We have some exciting stuff this week. Every single day, there'll be a podcast episode coming out at 7 a.m. PST. That's just a crazy amount of work, but it has been so worth it to bring this to you. At 10 a.m. PST each day, Sunday to Saturday from May 12th, we will be having a Facebook and Insta Live with really short episodes, but ones that are super tangible, where you have a tool to walk away with to help you get over overwhelm. Get over overwhelm. Because it's hard to dream big when you're still in survival mode. And let's face it, sometimes we're overwhelmed in this life that is mothering, right? So show up on those. And at the end of the week on Saturday, I am going to be giving away 2 pretty incredible prizes. I'm going to be giving 2 coaching packages for Possibility Coaching, where you get to work with me one-to-one and look into what your big audacious dream is and how you can get there. I will support you, I will cheer you on, and I am so excited to do just that. So 2 packages are coming your way for those people who do the following. You need to like the Facebook page, Permission to Be Human. And if you're on Instagram, you need to get on there and follow us on Instagram, Permission to Be Human Coaching. And finally, to really support this podcast, please go on Spotify and rate us and follow us. That will also make sure we get in your list, so it shows you when a new episode comes up. And if you're on Apple, then you can go in there and rate and write us a review. That really helps me and the podcast to be seen by more people, so thank you. And yeah, whoever does at least two of those things will be entered into a draw, and on Saturday I will find some magical online tool to pull it out of a hat and see who wins those 2 coaching packages. I'm going to add another one on, and I'm literally just thinking of it right now, which is I have a beautiful bookshelf behind me. If you're just listening to audio, you can't see it, but it is lovely and color-coded and gets commented on a lot. And I'm going to let you pick your favorite book off my bookshelf and send it to you in the mail. So that's pretty awesome. These books are full of science-backed tool, positive psychology, inspiration, parenting, strength-based models. There's so much good stuff up there. So I'm going to send you a book that will be a 3rd prize. So hooray, hooray. It's 1 year. Enjoy the podcast for today, and we'll see you soon. Hi, Sarah.
Hey, Mel.
I am handing over the hosting microphone to you today, which I
Woohoo!
just realized isn't actually plugged in. So I'm going to plug in the
Your
hosting microphone.
microphone. Amazing.
I'm going to
You
start.
you're plugging in the hosting microphone even though I'm hosting. I love this.
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to this takeover of Mel's beautiful podcast, Permission to Be Human. My name's Sarah, and I am very many things to very many people, and very luckily a dear friend of Mel's. Or she is a dear friend of mine. I don't want to put a judgment on how you feel about me.
I'd reciprocate that.
We met a long time ago as two Canadians in Cambridge, in England, and have been in and out lightly of each other's lives. And then probably maybe 5, 6 years ago, maybe a bit more than that now, actually, got realized how compatible we were and how connected we were in the way we felt about things and wanted to live our lives, and have been really close friends, business partners, charity, community builders, and else in between, happiness conference attendees. um, and so I'm delighted to take the microphone. And today we're going to have a deep dive on permission to be Mel, really. So welcome, Mel, to Permission to Be Human, and congratulations on this absolutely incredible milestone that you've managed to hit. I mean, I think we've talked about you doing a podcast for a number of years, and then you told me, it probably wasn't that much longer than a little over a year ago, and you just went, I'm going to do it. And you have done an absolutely amazing job, a stellar job, and shared so many different topics, and really, it created a space and talked through all these different topics for us navigating the world as mums or mums to be. So
Yeah.
welcome to your own podcast.
Thank
And
you,
I
Sarah.
was
And I love that you're here doing this with me. You're one of my favorite people in the world. And it's
ah
so funny. We showed up, like a little insight for the people listening. We showed up and we're like, so just to make sure we're on the same page here, no prep, we're just having a conversation, right?
yeah,
And because that is the style of both of us. And I know that our
yeah.
conversations are always good, they always have depth. And I was hoping that people could get to know me a little bit because, well, I share my, ideas and such all the time.
Mm.
I share very little about myself. I'm quite modest in that way in general. So this is an opportunity to share a bit more about me. And I love that you're like, permission to be Mel. I'm like, oh, like I feel like I already won at doing that. So like I can't fail no matter what I do.
Amazing.
Right?
Tick the
So
box.
tick, we're done now.
Tick. Amazing. That's so wonderful. Well, I'm going to turn the tables on you because I was listening to some of your episodes, re-listening to, familiarize myself with stuff just beforehand. And I realized you started your podcast by saying who is to your lovely guests. And I'm sure they enjoy it as much as you're going to. So I would love to invite you to tell us, who is Mel?
Who is Mel? And in the same way that all my guests are like flubbergasted, is that a word? Flubber? What's the word?
Flabbergasted, I think
Flabbergasted?
is the one
Thank
you're
you.
after. But
There's a little
flubber is
insight
good.
into Mel. I like big words, but can very rarely pronounce them or remember them correctly. Anyways, who is Mel? I'll start with the labels because that's what comes into all of our heads, right? Which is a mom of two kids. I have a now 9-year-old. She just turned 9, and one's about to turn 6. I know it's crazy. I have no idea how they got that old. And I've always felt like I was different than everybody growing up.
Okay.
I always felt kind of like I was watching from the outside and that I didn't understand why all these rules existed, that I didn't see why. Like I always wanted to ask why. Like, what,
Mm.
but why do we want to do that? Why do we have to do homework for tomorrow? Like, tell me the reason, right? And I remember
Uh-huh.
this. I remember this math teacher I had. It was like I'm actually pretty decent at math, surprisingly. I don't know why that's surprising, but it is surprising to me because, sometimes when you're good at the more people stuff, the math stuff isn't so much, but I was actually pretty good at math and I'd skipped a grade and I tried to do math 12 twice. And the second and I went away for like a soccer tournament or something because I was quite competitive back then and came back and couldn't catch up. So I canceled the first year, tried to do it again. And this teacher, I said to him, he's trying to explain, I don't know, something super complicated. And I was just like, but why do I need to learn this? Like, why is this important? I need to understand why this is important. And he just looks to me and he could not tell me why. And I was like, I quit math the next day. I
Mm.
went to this
Hmm.
student counselor and I was just like, do I need this course? Because I don't like, so that's me in a nutshell. I've always felt like I need to understand why we're doing something and that everything has to have purpose.
Mm.
And I've never really felt like I needed to fall in line with every little rule that happens in society
Hmm.
and yet
Hmm.
have this weird balance of wanting to like also be a rule follower. Like it's kind of
Hmm.
both.
Hmm.
Like I don't step super outside the like I don't not to the extreme, but I do. Yeah, I'm a rule challenger, let's put it that way. I
Within
like
the
to, and my
confines of
daughter's the
following
same.
the
I
rules.
think of it as like I like to, and she likes to know what the rules are to decide where I'm going to bend them. Like
Nice,
I like to
nice.
understand what they are to get the real picture first and then decide. So
That makes so much
underneath it
sense to
all,
me.
that's what I am. My good friend Lou Shackleton, who was on recently on the podcast, she one time called me a Y bird, and it's really stuck with me. Apparently, that's a thing in the UK. People there might understand what it is, but like I will question everything, and
Mm.
that's just who I am.
Yeah.
Um, so that's me, honestly. And there's lots of other labels I could give to myself, but that is underlying someone who wants to question the way the world works because if it's not working for everybody, it's not working, is
Mm.
how I think about it. So let's change those things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think I hear you being just super curious, actually. You're not questioning the rules because you like are just trying to be cynical or anything, but you're just trying to deeply understand. So curious and understanding
Yeah.
and questioning
Yeah,
is how I
definitely.
hear that.
And if you went into character strengths, love of learning is top of mind. And I think that curiosity has always been there with me. Like, why? Like, what is this? Why are we doing this? Alongside this deep desire to make a difference in the world. Like
Mm.
those, if the essence of me is those two things, like some of the work I used to do, we called ourselves the Change the World Gang because like, and that's big and audacious and like just too much, honestly. But it is
Mm.
at the core of what I want to do is somehow make a positive difference in one person's life, in tens and thousands, whatever it ends up being. But
Mm.
this real desire to be curious to help make things better.
I love that. And you always talk about, your big audacious dreams, your big audacious goals. Tell me about this because I think this is, you said a positive difference in that tens of thousands of people's I love how passionate you are about making a difference. But I want to hear you talk about it.
About why I want to talk about big audacious dreams. Is that what you're
Well, and
asking?
and maybe about like the size of impact is kind of what I was hearing there.
Hmm. I think that's a really interesting question because when I started this podcast, I didn't really care who listened, like how many people listened. I cared who, but
Mm.
not how many
Mm.
people. And I really truly believe that if one person listens to this and then makes a positive change in their life, that makes them feel more fulfilled, and gets them closer to flourishing and reaching their dream, which is going to then make a difference in the world,
Mm-hmm.
which then ripples and has someone else make a difference in the world. Like that is enough for me. So yes, I want to reach tens of thousands of people, but it doesn't have to be directly through me. You
Mm.
know, it's
Mm-hmm.
more about you reach that small group of people in order to reach the big ones because the ripple effect is there. That is what doing good does, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I was just talking on Tuesday, but before this episode actually airs, there's another one coming out by Jacqueline Way, and she's 365 Give, which is about giving every day of the year.
Mm-hmm.
And we were having this conversation about how it can just be one person. And me helping one person and giving to one person also helps me. And that's where happiness comes from, is us doing good in the world, right?
Mm.
And I love that. And I can totally own that. That, yeah, I want to make a difference in the world, but it's also because I want to make a difference to me. Like I want to be happy and
Mm-hmm.
I want to feel my best self so that the people around me also benefit from that too, right?
Yeah,
So it goes full circle.
I love that. So for people listening, and I bet you've probably dropped in little bits and pieces of this, I think you have such a fascinating s- journey, story, journey, however you want to get it, to where you are now. And talking about making a difference in the world. You've done some incredible work, big and small, and individual and group and community and world. So maybe just touch on some of how about some of your favorite parts of that journey, the work you've
Mm,
done or the people you've worked with.
yeah. It's really interesting because it's hard to decide what the favorite is. I actually like that you use that word because as everybody does, I look back and I think, but it didn't do this or but it didn't do that,
Mm,
right?
hmm.
And forget the it did this and it did that. And
Oh yeah.
so as soon as you start doing that, I'm like, oh, what do I pick? Because this didn't succeed in this way, or this didn't, but actually, when I go down the favorite route, it's about what brought me alive, right? So a bit of a background on it. So actually, I'm going to start a little earlier. So when I was 16 years old, I went to a summer camp
Mhm.
and it was called Camp Rainbow, which I love. They've now changed the name, but I think it was perfect. And it was a leadership camp, and I had never been to summer camp before. Actually, I went at 14 and I stayed until I think I was 17. I kept going back and then counseled at it, etc. And at this camp, it was the first time I really felt community and love in that
Mm.
community sense, right? I
Mhm.
felt like I could be completely and totally myself. And at that age, that's a very difficult thing to find. We're very self-conscious when we're teenagers, right? And it was a sleepover camp, and I felt this just real sense of like, this is where I'm supposed to be. So from that, I then decided like, that's what I want to do. I want to run this camp. That was my like big audacious dream as a teenager, right? Or something like it.
Mhm.
And so I counseled that I volunteered there. I did all that stuff. And then I went to university, did a general year, and then went into something called child and youth care as my degree. And because that was the closest one I could find that would lead me down that path. And I've never thought that the name of that degree was very good. It's a BA, a
Mhm.
Bachelor of Arts in Child and Youth Care, but it's similar to social work, but you don't do the kind of hard parts of social work as much, although
Yeah.
you can go down that route, but it's never one that I wanted to. But it teaches you how to work with people, right? It says you work with children, youth, and families. I'm like, well, that's literally everybody. We are one of those things, right? So it taught me, and it really allowed me to bring forth all that sense of curiosity and that why. I was constantly writing like 20-page papers about self-reflections on how my background or my thoughts or my biases affect this, that, the other, right? And I loved doing this degree. And it was broad. I didn't have to choose one thing that I was going to go out and do in the world, because that's
Mhm.
not who I am. I still can't choose one thing that I'm going to go out and do in the world, right? So it worked for me. It worked for me. So I did this degree and left and didn't know what I wanted to do, except I wanted to travel to every country in the world. That was the dream at the time. So I met my now husband. We got together in the second half of university, and we had 1 year of me working like 6 jobs at the same time, and
Wow.
like after school cares and camps and like all the things, and youth work, and yeah, just all the things I could basically fit in. Quiznos, like, like it's the
Obviously.
subway
It
of
was great.
here.
It
And
was great. It was great Subway at the time.
exactly,
I remember
exactly.
those years.
Right, I did what I could. And then a year after, we decided to go to England. And I wanted to travel, and my husband had already done a little bit of the backpacky thing. So he's like, I'd rather go stay somewhere and then we can travel around from there. So because he had a British passport, we went over to England, and we were going to go for 1 to 2 years. At least that's what I had, like, how I got my dad to not have a heart attack about this concept of me going overseas. So we went for 1 to 2 years, quote unquote, and it was 14. And so in those 14 years, honestly, my adult life was in the UK. And that's where
Mm,
I met you, Sarah,
yeah.
in various points along the way, funnily enough, but we ended up
Yeah.
together at exactly the right moment. Yeah,
Oh my gosh, yes. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly.
Hmm.
But going back to your question, what are my favorite parts of that journey? There are ones when I got there. So I applied for a few jobs, and I remember I got accepted to two. One was at a hospital in a teenage cancer unit, and it was doing the kind of recreational program with the teenagers that were there. And then the other one was at a charity that worked in the disability advocacy space. So it was really working with young people and adults who had learning disabilities, and supporting them to learn the skills to live more independently and to be their best self.
Hmm.
So I applied originally for a job there as a like program leader kind of thing, like go do the work with the people. And then after my first interview, they're like, I want you to apply for the manager job. And I was like, what? Like, I'm fresh out of uni. I don't know what you're talking about. But I did it, and then I got it. And I accepted that job over the cancer unit one, which I to this day am very thankful that I did, because
Hmm.
well, it would have been super impactful and I would have learned so much in the other role. I now realize how much of a sensitive person I am, and it would have torn
Mm,
me apart
yeah.
to
Yeah.
be in that setting at that stage in my life, especially when I wasn't as
Hmm.
self-aware. So I chose this other role because we called it member led, right? And that's what
Mm,
made them want me to apply for the manager, because in the interview I was asked to work with a little group of people and then present back what we did to the whole group. So they had the members, the people we were working with, in the interview with us. And I loved that. I was like, oh, this is great. And then we got to the presentation stage and I was like, but like, this isn't me. This isn't how I do it.
mm.
So I started bringing up the people that I was working with and said, hey, can you share what we did? And so and that was the epitome of what they wanted, essentially, without telling you that.
Mm,
So that just shows you that, because that's still who I am. I really believe that the people, whoever it is that we're working with, have to have ownership over what their life is. That's what
mm.
coaching is, right? I can't tell you what to do with your life. I
Yeah.
can't, right? You have to
Yeah.
decide what it is. And so I did that work, and I loved that work. For the first 6 months, I
Hmm.
loved that work, right? It was incredible to be able to work with an incredible team of people, to really challenge myself to like step into the role of manager and be like, oh, like maybe I can do this, right? Because I loved I loved managing. I
Yeah.
loved,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
set up
Yeah.
programs like nobody was taking lunch breaks. So I somehow managed to get them to agree at the upper level to give me a pot of funding to buy some gifts. And then we had this chart that you had to fill out. And if you took a lunch break 5 times, you got a gift. And a lunch break isn't at your desk. Like you got to go do
Yeah.
something at least
Go away.
like
I love it.
yeah, right. Which is like the opposite of what most places are, but it just shows you that's like the beginning of what I realized is the way that I work and where my belief system sits and how work should be, is that we're all human and we're meant to be there to
Mm,
enjoy what we are
mm,
doing, right?
mhm,
We're not
mhm.
meant to wear ourselves into the grounds. Like that's not
Yeah.
how it is, you know. And don't get me
Yeah.
wrong, the people who weren't taking breaks because they loved what they were doing, actually, because it was such a great place
Yeah.
at that time. But it was, yeah. So that kind of went on from there. Eventually I ended up leaving. I went from a small charity to a large charity in a very quick amount of time. Had my first mental health crisis in there. Was on beta blockers and all the things because I was in this position of having to tell people that they might not have their job and that
Mm,
I have no control over that. But I still have
yeah.
to tell you the bad news, and that's
Yeah.
shite, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So a bunch of us, like, long story short, in there, we got together and we started the Change the World gang. We're like, no, this is not the way it should work, right? We're supposed to. They all had the same beliefs as me, many of which had worked in that organization and were made redundant. And and that was my favorite part because that's when I started to become me, was
Mm,
meeting up and dreaming about how we were going to change the world. And I just came alive. It was the concept of doing good, but also the concept of doing it with other people. Like that's what we
mhm.
knew. We didn't know exactly what we were going to do. We knew we wanted to change the world and we wanted to do it together and we wanted it to be fun. Like that's what we wanted to do. And we had some core beliefs in there that like it needed to be inclusive because we'd all
Mhm.
just worked with lots of people with a variety of different disabilities, but it wasn't about disability, right? It
Okay.
was about people.
Mhm.
And we ran events like Misfit Local, where people from the community who identified with our message of being misfits in society would come and listen to these amazing talks and have these conversations with people and look a little surprised when someone with Down syndrome stands up and says hello and introduces the evening,
Mm,
right? Because they're there for the same reason, because they feel like they're a misfit in society and because they want community and connection. And so we connected people based on interests as opposed to based on the fact that they have whatever disability or ability, right?
yeah.
And that was the main difference that we started to make there. So that was like, that's when everything changed for me, was taking the leap out of an organization that I no longer believed as much in.
Mhm.
It didn't fit with my way of working anymore.
Mhm.
I loved bits and pieces of what I was doing, even in the larger organization. I ran a team of training and consultancy, a team of people with learning difficulties who then went and trained about disability awareness. Like that was amazing, right? I just
Yeah.
supported them in that process. But it could have been so much better than it was if I was doing it the way I wanted to.
Yeah.
So so starting this Change the World gang changed my world. So I guess we succeeded. And I got to start playing with ideas because that's what I love now, right?
Yeah.
I remember going down to London one day with Lou and meeting up with someone who we just like met on Twitter and sitting by in Hyde Park by the water and just like coming up with lots of ideas about something. I don't remember the exact topic. And I remember going home on the train and going, I wish I could do this. This is what I
Mm.
want to do. And Lou kind of just like was like, oh yeah, that would be nice. Like, and then I just kind of put it aside. And now I'm like, no, this is what I want to do. Like, I want to help people come up with their ideas. Like that's the space I come alive. That's what I'm good at. And that possibility zone is me. So I've talked a lot, and I've maybe answered some of that question that you asked of
Like a
me.
little, you got there.
Yeah,
I'm gonna draw you further out.
you
So
can draw me.
this, I was gonna say, it's okay to talk a lot. Today is all about you.
It's fair. It's fair. I'm not used to talking a lot. The ones that are
I
just
know.
these episodes that come out that are like just me talking, I figure that nobody listens to them, but they do, by the way. But I'm just like, it's just me rambling. What do you want to listen to? Anyways. I'm allowed
Dig
permission to
into,
be Mel today, right?
permission to be Mel today, and we're gonna dig
Yeah.
into a couple of those things a little later. But we're still telling the story, which is good because I think it's really important
Okay.
when we talk. You know, we're celebrating you and your accomplishments and your achievements, and I think this is such a great insight into how how do you get to be. And I think, we're now, I think I can talk about our age. You're cool with me talking about
Yeah.
we're in our 40s, and it's this
Yeah.
kind of like magical time. I feel like it's a magical time where you can kind of go and say, like, there's all these things, good and bad, that if they hadn't happened, and in the time I didn't even know what they were doing, but they've all now lined up so that right now, here and now, I am the perfect person with the perfect experience to do exactly what I'm doing right now. And if I hadn't done one of those things, I couldn't do this.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for you to share that story for people so they can understand. Like already now, I start to go, oh, yes, of course, this is, I am reminded about why you are where you are and how you're doing all the things that you're doing. So So and one of the first times I met you was at a Misfits local. And I can just say, as someone who kind of didn't really know what I was even turning up to because I'd been brought by a mutual friend. And it was the first time I'd ever experienced something. And I'll probably say this badly, so you can either edit it out or tell me how to say it correctly. Um, but often there is, people without disabilities doing things to showcase people who have disabilities, doing it for them or putting them in a place, or it's a and and the first time I ever saw something be what I would call truly inclusive, which meant everyone was fully welcome and present and able to be themselves, irrespective of how, I guess, the story of their life that they showed up with, was at that evening that you hosted. And I have always been and have been so blown away by that moment of going, that's what I had always seen as missing, because it felt very much, and someone now described using the term empowerment as, that's, it's mine to give you.
Hmm.
And I think I'm doing a bad job of expressing this, um but all the other things I had ever seen in that space were about empowering. So giving something to people, like they couldn't do it without you. And actually, that what you created was a space that was actually equal, that was
Yeah.
actually available for everyone. And so I was blown away. And even though we'd met a few times before, I think for me that was the time where I was like, wow, wow, there's something very special about this amazing human, and I want to get to know her more. But I know you did that multiple times in multiple ways. That was just
And I'll
my
just
personal
say
one.
we did that because that was a
Sure.
collaborative
Yeah.
effort. And, actually Lou is one of the, and Ruth, like Lou, Ruth and I are a part of the core team. And then we had
Mm.
Ames and Angela, and we had a core team of people that were working towards this. And you know what? Sometimes it's challenging, because actually a lot of the times it's challenging and so rewarding at the same time, because
Mm.
I have to question my biases of what someone
Hmm.
can and can't do.
Yeah.
But when I think about it now, I'm like, yeah, but I have to do that all the time,
Mm.
right? We all have different strengths and weaknesses and things we're working on
Yeah.
and things we're capable of and not. And yeah, it was definitely a we effort. And that part of my journey, which is why I shared that part of my story, was hugely impactful to who I am now. So do
Hmm.
I have that inclusive community right now the way that I would love it to be? Not yet. However, what I do have is the same belief system underneath where I truly believe that each human that comes my way is exactly that, a human with all the little bits and pieces that make them who they are. And I'm always thinking of ways to make it more inclusive from a disability perspective, but also from a like financial perspective. Like,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of people that do not have the privilege that I have in life. And how do I support them? They deserve the same development opportunities and
Mm-hmm.
the same opportunity to like have the support to follow their dreams and figure out what those are, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
in some ways even more so because they're more in survival mode, so they need support to get out of that so that they can start to get to the next stage. So this is something that definitely like underlies everything that I'm always thinking. It's also why I'm not a millionaire. Because, right? Because I could have taken my work and made tons of money by now if I was willing to compromise that value of mine, right? But instead of jumping forward in a business plan, I'm thinking, yeah, but there's still this part missing. How do I
Mm.
support everyone when you're supposed to niche, right? Like,
Yeah.
how does that
Yeah.
work? And I've definitely
Mm.
moved myself along that while still keeping that value at the heart
Mm.
of it all.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Thank you. So then what? What happened
So
after
then what?
Misfits?
So then it came to the point. Oh, so then, yeah, it came to the point where some of the projects that we were doing, our little change the world game started to split up into our own projects, essentially. And I started one called The Ordinary Super Parents. And the reason I did that is because my mothering journey, which if people have listened to a couple of episodes, I went more into depth in that, but was not an easy one at the beginning, getting to that point. And, after 3 years of trying, it was IVF and then miscarriage. And, you know, I finally got pregnant and I went, oh, like, what does that mean? Right. I'd spent so much time trying to
Mm.
get to that point that I hadn't really thought about what comes next. Which sounds a
Yeah.
little crazy, but it is.
I think it makes a lot of sense, and I think a lot of people have been on that journey now
Yeah.
because it's a different time. People are having children at different times or trying to have children at different
Yeah.
times now. I think it's yeah, you spend so much time thinking about
You're in the
the
moment,
how.
right?
Yeah,
Exactly. You're in
yeah.
the moment of how is this going to happen? That
Mm,
I wasn't in dreamland, which for me is weird because I usually am
mm,
thinking about the future, right? And so eventually got to this point where I was like, oh, so now I should probably like, what's this going to be like? And then I started to get a little concerned because I I have been known to have a fear of commitment.
okay.
My husband and now husband and I were together for 8 years before we got engaged. And honestly, what got us to the point of engagement was me saying, us having a conversation about, but if I want to just piss off and go travel the world for a few months, like, are you good with that? And he's like, yeah, of course. And I was like, okay, I love you. Like, you're still going to allow me to go and have adventures on my own. Right. I needed to feel free. That was a big
Mm,
part of it, even within
mm,
commitments. And it was the same thing for children. I needed, so I got to this point and then all of a sudden I was pregnant and I was like, oh no, freedom. And I got into this little
mm.
panic about what does that mean. So I started researching like people who were maybe still doing adventurous, like spontaneous things that society thinks you have to stop when you become a mother.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was hard to find. It was hard
Mm,
to find these people, but I found one here, one there, and then I found something called the Yes Tribe, Say Yes More, and went to a festival in October in the very cold weather of the UK after having my kid. And she was, I think, maybe 8 months old. And I remember looking at it, I was like, this is it. This is it. This is it. Like, we have to go to this next year, because it was like that weekend by the time I
Yeah.
found it. Eric, I found this thing. We need to, like, I think next year we're going to go to this. And I kept sitting with it. I kept reading it over and over again. I was like, I think we have to go this weekend. He's like, okay. So we had never camped before with our baby, and it was freezing cold, and it was glorious because I found people that were talking about adventures. But even then, there was only one or two scattered within that were parents, right? And
Mm,
instead, I ended up feeling a little bit like, yeah, but you can just piss off for 6 months. I can't just go do that now, right? I've
yeah.
got this
Yeah.
kid. So I wanted to collect them together, the people who were doing the things. And I pitched it at the like free mic at the end of that event, and the community started from there. And the ordinary super parents became this group of people who were who were wanting to and willing to and looking for inspiration to go and find adventure in a life as a parent, both
Mm,
with our children and without. The ordinary everyday adventures and the bigger, wilder dream adventures. And we were an online community, as well as having, like, we had in your backyard, Sarah, we had an
back
event.
in
Well, I
my
think maybe one
backyard.
of our
That's right.
first events. Yeah.
Yep.
Sarah has the most
Yep.
amazing, you have the most amazing backyard, Sarah. Um,
I don't
a
know if you're
properly
listening in
English
Canada.
one,
I
super
was gonna say
skinny,
not in a
but super
Canadian
long.
sense, but in a British sense, it's pretty
No, it
spectacular.
is. Even in a Canadian sense. Who has a woodland at the end of their of their
Uh,
backyard or garden, as we would say there? So we invited a bunch of people over, didn't we? And there was like at least two, maybe three families who had never camped with their kids before. And this was a safe place for them to camp in your backyard. I remember at one point it started chucking it down rain, and we just went inside. So we
It's
had the
very,
freedom
yeah,
to feel that safety while
mm,
stretching our boundaries and having that community. We shared meals, we had a big
yeah,
fire, like it was so
yeah,
beautiful.
yeah. Lots of people with little kids, lots of people who had been scared to try it because it is scary. So yeah, you kind of create those nice boundaries of like, it's okay, you can just go sleep in the house if it gets too much, or yes, your kids can go and have a bath before they go to bed, you know.
Yeah,
um
exactly. And I
yes,
still think to this
there is
day I
running
might have to
water and
run
flushing
something like that
toilets.
again. Yeah, totally. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the start of it. And we went from there. We had other camping trips. We ran a happy family camp at this double-decker bus that had been converted. And I'm going to keep having a coffee fit just for a moment.
Okay, let's just pause. That's what I was worried was going to happen to me. Been happening all week.
I've been talking a lot.
Mm, yes.
Just let it happen for a moment.
Yeah, just yeah, you can't if you try to hold on to it, it'll keep going.
Exactly. Okay.
How's it going?
I think I'm good.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So happy family, or happy, what was it? What did I call it? We are happy
Happy
parents, I
family.
think we
We are
changed
happy
it to.
parents. That's right. Yeah.
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 The camp was Happy Family
Yeah.
Camp, but We Are Happy
Yeah.
Parents became its own company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we had this amazing camp in your backyard, and then we ended up shutting down or pausing the organization, the You Can't Hub, which is what it was, the Change the World became.
Yeah.
And you and I needed someone to come on board. So I'm like, Sarah, can you be my director with me?
Yeah.
And of course, you're like, yep, let's do it. The best director meetings ever, often in a pub with
Yeah.
food and drink and, and
Or at the
all the great
house
things.
with wine, I think. Your house, my house,
That
pizza
definitely
parties.
happened. Often there was naked children running around in the background.
I think almost always, like that might have been like
Yeah, I
I
mean,
don't
that
know
was
that
a
that ever
theme.
didn't happen in the early days.
Yeah, totally. Totally. And that ran until I left for the UK, which was when my daughter was going to be starting kindergarten in Canadian standards, because that's a year later. And we decided to move back in March 2020, which was a whole nother story. But
That's a whole different story. Yeah, that's for
um,
not for today.
not for today. That could be a whole episode. I can share
That's a
that
whole
whole
other episode.
experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was that was the start of me really venturing out and realizing that I am an entrepreneur, and
Mm.
has definitely got me to where I am. I wish there was more closure in that thing. I had planned on like being able to come back and run events, and I moved in the height of COVID, and it
Yeah.
just had different plans for me.
Yeah.
So, but it was so that was one of my most favorite parts of that journey, was getting to just work with you. And we would have like, you were doing other things as well. This was part of
Yeah.
the work
Yeah.
that you were doing. You have your own amazing company that you were running called Happy Coffee. And we always had this, you know, nice link of like the same desire of what we were trying to do in the world.
Yeah.
And we would have, what did we call them, co-working days? I can't
Yeah.
remember. I
I
think
think so.
so.
Yeah, I think
And
so.
like those were my favorite days, where it would be like, I got
So
to get
great.
something done. I'm bringing my like 1 year old, 2 year old,
Yeah.
however old they were at the time,
Yeah.
over, and we took turns looking after the
Having
kids,
meetings, taking them
having meetings.
outside for a play. Yeah, absolutely. And it was,
Exactly.
as like two, I think at the time we were pretty successful business women trying to navigate how do you do this with small people who you want to have with you. And I think I was listening to one of your earlier episodes talking about that, like the only option you saw as a mom was to stay at home
Yeah.
and to be the parent, or to parent in the way that you and your family want to do that. And I didn't ever quite have that option. But I also, knowing myself now and knowing where I am, I wonder if I would have anyway. I mean, when I was on maternity leave from my job, I started my own kind of charity thing, which then ultimately led into the business that I started. And but that was that sense of having a community of someone else who understood the type of parenting that we both kind of wanted to give,
Yeah.
and and the importance of going and getting our brains tickled and actually being kick-ass business women and being successful and selling ourselves, and hosting amazing communities and inviting incredible groups of people together, and
Yeah.
frankly just smashing those dreams. Is I think you were really pivotal for me in being able to, I think even before we knew that this was where your business was going at the moment, you often gave me permission to be both those things at the same time, just through our
Mhm.
friendship and stuff. And then, when we went into a more kind of formalized coaching sessions, you actually gave me a permission slip at one time. I recall. I don't even honestly, I can't even remember what it was for at this point, Mel. Do you
I can't
remember
remember
my
either,
first?
but
I
it's
can't
just
remember what my permission slip
permission to
was
be
for.
a human, I
It
think, in
was that, but
general.
it was just like
Yeah.
like an actual, like you used to get at school. And so many times I realized, even earlier today, like something I'd been noodling on in my head, that that opportunity for someone who understands you to give you permission, which you didn't need. There was absolutely nothing in your way, but it changes flicks the switch for a
Mhm.
lot of us, I think. So it's really funny to have seen that. And then,
Yeah.
but yeah, those co-working days were really special. And I think, yeah, I used to have yours and you used to have mine, and we'd throw that around. It was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So then, as you said, you made the wild dash across the world,
Yeah.
totally successfully, by the way.
Amazingly. Still
I
surprises me,
mean,
but
oh
yes.
my gosh. And you landed back in Canada 14 years later, a few more children and a few I'm sure experiences and other things that came on in the luggage that were not just things.
Yeah.
So what have you been up to since?
Well, honestly, the first year was survive,
Mm,
literally,
mm,
pandemic. And coming to a new world is what it felt like, where I wasn't allowed to meet people. It was my
mm,
darkest times in that year. I had pretty young kids still. One was just turned two, or was just turning two when we moved,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
and the other five, and helping and managing them. And I just like threw myself into that. And I should point out, yes, I decided I needed to be that parent who stayed home. And that was never my plan. I never,
mm.
ever wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. That was not on the cards for me, right? I just never envisioned them
Yeah,
as the person that I would be. And then situationally, it just came up. And once I had kids, I realized that actually the alternative to that seemed worse to me.
yeah.
So that's what I ended up choosing alongside, like you say, tickling my brain by a million things.
Mm,
But when we came to Canada, I got to this place where I didn't see purpose anymore. I didn't see possibility.
mm,
I did my best. I cleaned the house a lot, and I got it really into like building out my kids' bedrooms, which like in another life I would be a children's play space designer because it really like made me come alive. I learned woodworking, I learned how to sew, like all these amazing things that slowing down like that gave me the opportunity to do. And I realized I was getting to the point where I didn't feel like me anymore.
mm,
And so I started to explore learning because I knew I liked learning. And I knew I was like, I'll go back to university. I always enjoyed writing
mhm,
papers weirdly and like stuff like that. And I started searching, like I was gonna originally when I went to university, I wanted to do psychology, but then I took a couple psychology courses and I was like, these are just like multiple choice exams, memorizing this, that, and the other. And I like, this isn't what I aspired to be. So I started searching and eventually I found this applied positive psychology course through the Flourishing Center and was like, oh, like it was written for me. Like the way she
mm.
described it was very good marketing directly to me, right?
She
Because it
she could niche, right?
she knew how to niche, but she niched in the way that was like change makers. She talks to change makers and uses those words, and I'm like, ah, you're my gal, right? You understand why we're doing this. We're out there to make a difference. And so I started this course, and it was 9 months long, and it was meeting twice a week for like 2 hours, and all these other people who are also going through the challenges that is COVID. And, we're on line meeting, talking about very in-depth stuff. And some people are there in order to do this as a career, and some are there just to develop themselves. And I didn't know what I wanted from it, honestly. I just really loved learning the material and learning about how the brain worked. And as I read it, I was like, I do all this stuff, right? I say all this stuff, but I don't have anything to back me up. It's all just my experience. I never felt like I was fully valid in saying everything because it was just like experiential, just my thing. Where applied positive psychology gave me the science behind it to say, no, this is actually what has been studied and shown to work. Now I'm like, we got to share this with the world, right? And alongside that, through the same organization, did my coaching at the same time. So a positive psychology twist on coaching. And Amelia, who runs that, is just incredible. And her coaching style is it's so me. Like it is just get into curiosity. Trust that the other person has everything they need, and everything they need they need. Everything they have
Mm,
they need. Right? And that changed my life. And I know that's totally a cliche, but honestly, going on that course was the exact moment that I needed it, both of those courses, and helped me believe in myself again. I got coaching by doing coaching programs. So I was able to work through some of the stuff that, was the trauma of that move, and was the
yeah.
trauma of having a second kid and ankle surgery and all the other things that came in with that, right?
Mm,
And I finally started to feel like myself again.
mm,
And then it just got to me going, okay, let's do something with this. My final project was a podcast for that course, and along alongside a good friend of mine, Deb Bradshaw, who I will convince to come on this podcast one day. I'm
Yes,
twisting her arm.
please.
I'm gonna send her this episode so she can hear it. She'll kill me, but and we were gonna do a short podcast series on community because community is top of my values, right?
Yeah.
And then I waited another like 6-7 months. No, a year. It was a year. And then eventually I was, I'm doing this. I'm just doing this. And here we are. I just have tried not to overthink it. If anybody out there is like, I've always thought about a podcast, but what do I have to say? And do people really want to listen? And I don't have the time. And you try to think through all the little details of exactly like, how do you get your SEO right? And how do I get this set up? And just forget all that nonsense. Honestly, like do whatever needs to happen and whatever the task is, whether it's a podcast or something else, like just start.
Yeah.
I just committed to doing it, and I committed to do it every single week. And it is the best thing I've ever done for myself. Right. I
Wow.
hope it's out there helping people. I've talked to people who've listened who say it is, but it is the thing that has gotten me into momentum because it's something
Mm.
I've committed to doing every week. And it's not just me blabbing every week, right? I am forced through my own commitment to go talk to really cool people. And by doing that, I get energy and I get ideas and I get momentum. And that's the best part of it all, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
because some days I wake up and I have something scheduled to go and talk to someone. I'm like, oh my God, I do not feel like doing this today. Right.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I come out of course I go and do it. Unless I'm
Yeah.
sick or something. It's not like I've
Yeah.
never canceled. But if there's no reason behind that other than like I don't have momentum today, I talk to someone, I get inspired and I have energy afterwards. So
Mm.
for my own mental health and well-being, it has boosted it because it's connection, it's community, right? It's purpose as well. It's me saying, oh, look, I did do it anyways. And now I have something to put out next week, right? Yeah.
And it's learning.
And it's learning every day, every single time.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
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 So with that in mind, I mean, I love your story and I want to just talk to you, but obviously let's make this part of the podcast. So you sent me some of your favorite episodes and
Mm-hmm.
maybe can you no, I'm going to ask you like your favorite thing about these because you sent me the list and I was listening to them. But actually, I'm just gonna quiz you because then you don't have to think about things all on your own. I'll be slightly more gentle to you. Let me just find your list. So I love that this was your first one. I was thinking it would be, but I'm glad that it was. Catherine Edsel, episode 20
Mm-hmm.
for anyone who wants to go and listen to it. Give us a 1 minute. Why is it one of your favorites, and what was the best thing about it?
Yeah. So that one was one of the first like dream ones I wanted to get.
Mm,
And it's so
mm,
funny. It was like I get taught this over and over again, but it's someone who I really admire. Catherine is so incredible. She's done a TED Talk. She's doing this amazing adventure stuff. She was part of my life in the ordinary super parent kind of part of my life, right? She was part of the Yes Tribe. I saw her speak at that first festival I went to and slept outside in October, right? And her whole thing was, so the actual title is I wanted to go out and change the world, but I couldn't find a babysitter. And
mm,
listening to that, and that's, her TED Talk and what it's all about, it it impacted me so much of those early days of motherhood because it
mm,
was me in a nutshell. I was like, yeah, but how? Right. And she was the first person that I really connected to on that level, I think, but I didn't know her that well back then. Right.
yeah.
And I think one of the reasons that's my favorite one is one, the content, 100%. She is incredible. She's taking woman off to Namibia to do a matriarch adventure. And like, I'm going on that one day. She knows it. I'm like, you got to keep running it because I'm just waiting for the right year for me to be able to get there. She also runs one with kids, like you could do a daughter mom one, and that's like the
Yeah,
dream. I
yeah.
think my daughter has to be 12 first. So she's a role model. She inspires me by the work she does, and she's a real human.
Mm,
That's the lesson that I learned in
mm,
getting her on fairly early on in the podcast, right? Is
mm.
that she said yes, and we had a great conversation. And when we went to the UK last March, we met up and had a chat and had a walk, and it's so easy for us to look at these people that we think are so much further ahead of us or better than us in some way and think that they're just not
Yeah,
human. And she's just
yeah,
a wonderful mom who has done all these things and wants to
yeah.
share it. Um,
That's
so
awesome.
that is why, and that is what I want other people to get out of it. So that is why that is one of my top episodes.
Yeah, totally recommend it. I re-listened to it this morning,
Yeah.
in preparation for this. Second one, episode 21, permission to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah. So I honestly don't remember exactly everything I said in that episode, but it was one of my solo ones, and it's the ones that people have come who have listened and said, I listened to that 3 times. That's
Mm,
exactly what I needed to hear. And I
mm,
think I'm so passionate about that as a topic that
yeah.
this is what it is, that us as mothers, we are overwhelmed most of the
Mm,
time,
mm,
unless we intentionally set aside the time, space, tools to help ourselves
mm,
get out of it more quickly. Right. So
mm,
to me, that is one of the core messages to get out
yeah,
there, is that it's okay. You're going to be overwhelmed.
yeah,
Like we tell people who are pregnant all these great things about motherhood, but we forget to tell them that it's overwhelming. And
yeah.
then you get overwhelmed and you feel alone and like you're the only one that feels this way.
Mm.
And that's not the case.
Yeah,
Every
and
single
everyone else
mom
looks
I've
like
ever
they've got
met.
it together, and yeah, they're not overwhelmed, and they can look at what all the things they can do, and yeah,
Exactly.
we're all there. Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that. What happens when mothering is a verb? Oh, and this one,
Mm.
it was like it was like lovely, beautiful, lovely, and then it hit me right in the heart at the end.
So you were part of that one without knowing it, right? So when we met up last year and we went to the happiness summit, World Happiness Summit in Italy, just so randomly, like, do you want to come with this? Yes, I do. Yes, I do want to come to
Do you want
Italy.
to just come to Italy to the World Happiness Summit and like, in the most beautiful like Lake Como? Should we go there and like hang out?
Exactly. Exactly. I was like, I don't even care what the conference is. I'm going to hang out with Sarah in Italy.
Yeah.
Um, but also
Obviously,
conference
I'm the
great.
highlight of that.
But while we were there, I found myself, because yes, the conference was great. I was excited about the topics, but I honestly was there because I wanted to see you in your space doing your thing, because this is your conference in some ways. To me, it was. So I kind of naturally found myself falling into this role of mothering you while we were there. And we started
You
having these
did.
conversations about what that meant. I'd be like, you haven't, like, have you had breakfast? Like, I'm just gonna bring you some, okay? Like,
Yeah.
just in this way that is, no, you're not my child, but yes, I, with your permission, would like to mother you right now,
Yeah.
right? And in our conversations after that, that was really helpful and what you needed in those moments.
Oh my
And
gosh. Yeah. And it's so funny you said that because when I was listening to it, that's exactly what I was remembering that day in the kitchen where you said, I really feel like I want to mother you while we're here. Is that okay? And it was everything I needed. And not just like some of what I needed, it was everything I needed. So it's
yeah,
funny that that was what came about that. So,
well, and it made me think about this fact that we are mothering is a verb,
mm,
right? Like,
mm,
you don't have to be, and it also makes it more inclusive, which excites me greatly. Like, you could be
mm,
listening to this and not have a child.
Yeah.
that has come out of your body,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or not have a child that you've adopted or whatever it is. It's you can still be, you can mother. Mothering is a verb, and it helped me
Mm.
down this path of realizing that mothering is what's going to change the world. And that is now like the purpose and the vision that I go by. So I chose that one because that was a pivotal moment where I realized that that is the
Yeah.
vision and I could put words to it.
Ooh, that's so exciting. And it's so beautiful. I can't and then to try to explain it in words is hard because I feel like actually the mothering, the verb, is a feeling that you get when someone takes care of you, but it's not just in like physically, but mentally and emotionally and holding space and
Yeah.
noticing those things and taking the mental load for you and just, creating this
Yeah.
bubble of love and support. And so, yeah, I think that is probably what the world needs right now. A lot more of
Well, and
that.
that is the village that's in the cliche, right?
It is. Yeah.
And it doesn't even have to be the same person all the time, but it's someone that
No.
can just hold that for you so you can feel the weight off your shoulders,
Yeah.
even if ever so briefly, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. Next up, Nick Heap, who I know has been
Mm,
a big part of your life for a long time, in and out, I guess.
yeah,
Yeah.
he has been. And I chose that one because of that. He was a big part in me figuring out, the next stage of what I wanted to do. No, that's not even who I wanted to be, is what he helped me figure out my next
Mm,
stage of and gave me, worked with me as a coach, and we did like co-coaching back and forth, and he's this experienced man, the first and only man so far to come on the podcast, who I really admire his way of being. He's so gentle. He's,
mm,
quite a bit older than me, so very like experienced in
hmm.
life.
Yeah.
And yeah, I picked that one because his message is incredible. He's
Mm,
just, if we just listen, the world would be better. Like, yeah, wouldn't it be?
yeah.
And that sits in my
Wonderful.
curiosity space, right?
Mm,
Yeah. And that actually, with the whole journey of coaching and learning all these things. So it might not come across like this as a podcast host. You think like I'm pretty good at talking to people, but my whole life I've really struggled with small talk. I've really struggled
mm,
in a space full of people that I don't know or that I know
hmm.
very little. I've struggled at school drop-offs, knowing what to say to the other parents that are there, like meeting people. Like, how do you do that? How do
Yeah.
you have a friend as an adult? How do you start that conversation, right? And the reason I bring that up is because Nick was part of that journey, and coaching was part of that journey of figuring out it doesn't matter what you say.
Mm,
Don't talk about yourself. Just be curious. Listen. That's it. That's what connection and relationships are.
yeah.
Like, what do I really want to know about this person who's just dropped off this kid? Like, how are you? No, like, how are you for real? Or I noticed
Yeah.
that you were in a rush yesterday. Like, how's it going? Like,
Yeah.
it's not about me talking about the weather or something in like that is not interesting. And it's
Yeah.
not about me trying to like share about myself all the time. It's about just being curious, and that listening thing that Nick talks about is that. And that was a pivotal time for me. And I still struggle in those situations, but a lot less. I can remind myself that just be curious.
Mm. Ugh, I love that. And it's funny because when you were talking about everything that you were and that you were interested in at the beginning of this, actually, what I heard was you are curious. So
Yeah.
you just actually have to be you.
Yeah. Pretty much
Mm, mm.
lean into that.
Yeah. Episode 35, lean into your purpose.
Yeah, I think I really picked this one because purpose is such a big part of my message and my
Hmm.
work as well. And I've had a lot of conversations about it. A recent one with my husband about like what is purpose and how it can come across as like we have to find that one ultimate purpose in our life.
Mm.
right? And it can be this very striving mentality.
Yeah.
And that's not what it is. That's not purpose. Purpose is this sense of knowing that you matter and that you have something to give to this world and you're making a difference in some way. And that could be something a little different each day in terms of action,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? I don't need to know, I don't have to choose one career to have purpose. And despite what they'll teach me in high school, right? Like, I
Yeah.
don't need to know
Yeah.
what I want to do when I grow up.
Mm-hmm.
What I want to
Mm-hmm.
do is just something different each day that has purpose for me and the world and makes a difference somehow. So I chose that one. It is a great conversation with Linda. And the topic of purpose is just so core
Yeah.
to, that is what big audacious dreams are, is finding purpose, is within yourself. It's not out there in the world. It's
Mm.
already in you. It's just
Mm.
a matter of like stepping back and looking deep within. Yeah.
That's amazing. Episode 38, permission to ask for help.
Yeah. So this one
Mhm.
is another topic very close to my heart, right?
Mm.
It's very easy to not ask for help. It makes your
Mm-hmm.
life a lot harder, but it's very
Yep.
easy to not do it,
Yep.
right? And it's a big one for me. There's Amanda Palmer is like one of my dream people to get to come on this podcast one day. She's written on my board over there if she ever happens to run into this podcast,
Mm.
under my dream people, because she really helped me realize that asking for help is a gift to
Mm.
somebody else, right? It's going back to that
Mm.
mothering thing. If we think of that exact
Yeah.
situation in the kitchen. So you
Yeah.
didn't ask for help with your words, but I saw it, right?
Mm.
And me, if you had asked me, I would have felt so much privilege and gratitude for being the person that you trusted to
Mm.
help you,
Yeah.
right? And so often we think that the other person will be put out,
Yeah.
and we forget that it's actually a gift to them.
Yeah.
And part of the gift is trusting that they'll say no if they have to.
Yeah.
So it's giving them the gift of you trusting them to
Yeah.
say no. And
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on your relationship, I might say, like, you can say no to this. It's okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
I'm going to trust that you're gonna do what you need to
Yeah.
do. And I would love it if you could help me with X, Y, or Z.
Yeah.
Right. So it's a big topic. It's one that, so another little tidbit from my life, I can stick a link in the notes somewhere, but I went to the World Domination Summit, which is like the best named conference in the world, in my opinion.
That
It is
sounds like a
also,
really different kind of
I
conference,
know,
Mel.
it's it's in Portland. I'm not sure if they run it anymore, but it is Chris Guillebeau runs it, and Lou and I went over when I still lived in England, but we went to Portland, Oregon to go to the World Domination Summit. It is not what you tell the immigration officer that you're like customs officer that you're going through.
No.
Like, don't tell them the name of the conference. I did not. I was just like, I'm going to a conference. Anyways, at this conference, I had pitched before going to be one of the like quick speakers. They had like 5-minute
Mm-hmm.
things up on the stage. And they hadn't gone back to me. And I show up and they said, we chose you. We want you to be one of these people. I said, oh, okay. Meanwhile, Lou and I had this like mischievous plan of showing up me in a robot costume and her in a superhero costume. And we did like, what do you call them? Like freeze moments, like
Mm-hmm.
out in
Oh, like
community,
flash
flash
mob kind
mob
of thing.
style, right?
Yeah.
So we had
Yeah.
people like pretending to be superheroes, putting on capes we brought, and like me and the robot, because I was the robot of mediocrity, so it was like the nemesis of all the superheroes. And we had people from the conference taking part in this, and then they told me this, and they were like videoing me. And anyways, so then in my mind, that was part of the story, even though it's not the story I pitched to them. So I showed up on the stage in front of 2,000 people with like literally wearing a box, and as you do, right?
I was
But you
just
know
gonna
what? It
say,
was
seems
almost like
totally like
my,
a legit plan.
yeah, totally, totally. It was almost like it was my costume. right? And I actually, the first thing I did is I went on the stage. I had this boxy helmet thing on as well. I went on the stage and I took my helmet off and I said, it's time to step out of the box. And then my talk was all about asking for help and how there's 2,000 people in this room. And if we ask,
Mm,
each of us goes and asks someone if they need help and how can I help you? Or can I offer a particular type of help? Then we've changed 4,000 more ripple effect, right? We've given them
mm,
the honor of helping. And I specifically went into the inclusiveness of that as well. Like I was telling a story about a young man with Down syndrome who, think about it. How often is he asked for help if he could help?
mm.
He asks for help all the time.
Yeah,
But asking him for help in return gives him this sense of pride and purpose. And, you know, like asking for
I
help is
matter.
such an
Yeah,
important thing that we can give the world. And we need to remind ourselves of that because we need help as well, right? We all do.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, we're not built to do this on our own.
No.
And yet somehow we keep telling ourselves that we fail if we haven't, right?
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
And then the last one on your list was the Give 365, which isn't even out yet. So this is like a prequel post. I don't even know what this is because we're
It's a
recording it,
prequel
but it
right
will
now, but by the time they
or
listen to
see,
this,
but
it'll
it
be out.
will be a
Yeah.
sequel. I don't really know.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. But it is, do you know what? Jacqueline Way is someone who I didn't expect to say yes to being on the podcast. I watched her TED Talk and was so amazed. And she really, really reminded me that doing good in the world is really important to me. So this whole journey of entrepreneurship and trying to figure out how to niche down and who I want to work with. And, I niched down to moms and then I kind of shifted away from the change makers, quote unquote. And then I realized that it's all one, it is about making a difference in the world. And I love how Jacqueline really has come up. She took a project that she ended up doing with her son, her 3-year-old son, where they would do something good every day, give every day. That could be picking up garbage. It could be baking for the local fire station. It could, anything big and small that she did for a year with her son and turned it into a charity. And it's this big thing now, but it started with something so small. It's not what her vision was. She didn't go into this big audacious dream of running this thing and then think about how to make it small. She just started doing it. And then the dreams started to come. Then the
Hmm.
vision started to come. And I really love that, the simplicity of that. And also like reminder that, yeah, I just really want to do some good in this world. And I want to help other people do some good in this world. So that's why I love that episode.
Mm.
Mm.
I'm gonna wrap this up, but I'm gonna also but I'm gonna do it in a I hope it will end kindly. I'm sure this will be fine. When we were talking about what you wanted to get out of today, you said lots of cool things and you were all of those things. And then you said this line, and because this is for moms, this is who this podcast is for. I'm gonna pull you on it and then I'm gonna bring you around. And you said these words to me, Mel. You want to feel like you accomplished some stuff.
Yeah.
And I want to challenge you on that
Hmm.
because I think if you had been interviewing me and I had just told you those stories and talked about that on episode 46 of my podcast and all of the people you've touched and the things you've done and the life that you've led and everything you've learned and all the things around that, what would you tell me
Hmm.
about if I said I wanted to feel like I accomplished some stuff? What would you tell your friend?
I would tell you exactly what I would tell me. which is everything that has happened until this point is exactly what needed to happen to get to this point. And it's not about the stuff. It's about who you are and who it's helping you become. And that has been a journey to get to the point of truly believing for me. And I think the reason I said that as what I wanted is because, so what I don't mean by that is I don't, when I say, I want to feel like I accomplished some stuff, I don't mean I want others to feel like I accomplished some stuff,
Mm,
right? Because actually, I think others already do.
mm,
And it's more a challenge back to myself of like celebrating what I have done to this point
mm,
and like really being grateful for it and seeing the positive angles of that, right? Because I could tell you the things that I didn't do, how it didn't get to this point or it didn't do, I could go into all of that. And
Easy. That's the easy way.
exactly, right? And I think it's really interesting I think the reason I came into this conversation of what I wanted out of this is because as a podcast host who I can state the 10%, top 10% rule, all the great things. I think people listening can put me up on a pedestal and
Mm,
think, wow, like she's done all this stuff, and then belittle themselves for not.
mm,
And I kind of want to help people realize that they've all done all this stuff to get them to this point, and that actually it's okay that this didn't finish or that didn't happen or whatever. I am still so proud of what I've done to get to this point in time.
mm,
And I am excited about what will happen because I do feel honestly like I'm on the crux of something right now. And it's really exciting. And something really cool is going to come out of this. And it already is.
mm.
And some real tangible change that I can hold on to will and maybe already is happening. So I want to feel, and I do feel, looking at, what my journey has been, I feel like it is valid and I feel like I am valid and I have officially achieved permission to be Mel, right?
Yay!
I've officially been Mel. Yeah.
I love that that's where you got to. So how about we finish up, easy for me to say, by saying what, we're celebrating your anniversary of the podcast. It's a huge celebration. What are, I don't know, one, two, three things that you would like to celebrate for
Hmm.
being Mel?
I would like to celebrate just getting the shit done.
Yeah, nice
And like
one.
it's good shit. Like I say
Yeah.
that very well. Not overthinking for the year and
Mm,
just doing.
mm, amazing.
Overthinking, I'm pretty good at it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And I am celebrating the fact that I couldn't have got this done if I overthought.
yeah,
I put myself in a position where that was not possible.
yeah.
So I'm celebrating just doing it, just going for it, just
Amazing.
doing it, accomplishing it. There's only 1 week where an episode didn't come out, and that's because I thought I pressed the thing and didn't. So I'm okay because the work was done. And yeah, getting to where we are. That's I think the first one. I think I'm celebrating my own voice
Mm,
and the courage it takes to put that out there
mhm,
and to ignore or just kind of like watch in passing the thoughts that will come and the limiting beliefs that will come and have
mm,
come. as I do that. And that it doesn't matter if it doesn't reach everybody. It doesn't matter if each episode doesn't hit everybody the same way. It's about just finding that one person who it does. And if I can make that one difference that ripples out, that's amazing. So yeah, celebrating the courage to put my voice out there. And the third is celebrating all people mothering in the world and everything that it is bringing to our world that has a lot of darkness in it as well. Mothering is the light. It is what the world needs. And I am so excited to hear any stories that people have of how they're doing that, because that's what lights me up. Like I love hearing those stories and sharing those stories more widely for others who like hearing those stories.
Yeah.
And yeah, so celebrating the listeners, celebrating those out there mothering and doing good and about to do good, and they don't even know it yet, you know?
Yeah.
And they're already doing good because mothering your kids is doing good, you know? And yeah, so that's what I'm celebrating, is those things.
Pretty amazing. Well, thank you for inviting me to celebrate you. I will hand the microphone back to you. Hand hosting duties back over. I hope you enjoyed making today all about you.
Thank you. It's a funny one. I have really enjoyed it because I love every conversation you and I have, Sarah. And that's why you are the one that is here, because it's not always easy to just talk about me. But I'll do it with you.
Oh, thank you.
So thank you for coming and taking the host seat from me. Sarah, you do have a podcast as well.
I do have a podcast.
So
yeah.
if you like Sarah's voice, like go and listen to that. You are like the knower of all things how to help people be happy, especially in like the business world. And I love that that's the space that you put yourself in, because it is yet another way of making that impact in the world in all of the different ways that you have done and are doing that now.
Oh,
now tell us the name of your podcast so we can go and find it.
My podcast is called Thriving with Sarah and Jenny, and you can find us basically wherever podcasts are found.
Nice. I love it. Thank you for joining me today. It's always a pleasure to chat.
Total pleasure.
And yeah, speak soon.
Okay, bye.
That is it, folks. This has been Mel Findlater on Permission to Be Human, the podcast. And I am so glad that you have joined us here today, and hope that you have taken away some tidbits that will help you go away, connect with your big, audacious dream, and make that massive impact in the world that you are dying to make. If you liked today's episode, please, please, please like it, share it. Think of one person. Think of one person that you think would also like it, and send it on over to them. Let's get this out there, and more moms feeling like themselves, inspired, dreaming big, and out there being them. Please do head on over to find me on Facebook with Permission to Be Human, or Instagram, or you can even pop me an email and say hello at permissiontobehumanalways@gmail.com. Say hello and let me know that you listened. What did you like about it? I would love to hear. If you didn't like it, I don't really want to know. Just kidding. You can share that if you want. I would love to know, however, who you are. Let's connect. Let's find out what you want more of. I want to hear from you, and I want to make it what would be useful to you. As always, remember that you have permission to dream big, permission to feel big, and permission to be you. You have complete and full permission to be human. For real, you do.